Thank you for staying with us on the program. It's still Report Desk Africa. And like we mentioned earlier, Zimbabwe is currently experiencing a brain drain like never before, especially in the education sector, where about 300 teachers leave the country every single month. Now, the primary cause of this mass exodus is attributed to, of course, low wages in the country compared to other Southern African nations, which, of course, is making the teachers lament. Now, while salary increases are challenging due to economic constraints, the country must find ways to retain and attract teacher or teaching talent. Our correspondent, Omolola Ololade, tells us more in this report.
For a country that held education as one of its topmost priorities after becoming independent in 1980 and has since been among the most literate nations in Africa, Zimbabwe today is in the middle of a crisis with the torchbearers of the sector feeling disillusioned and undervalued. The average teacher in Zimbabwe earns a maximum of $350 per month, leading to a loss of qualified teachers, vital for mentoring the nation's learners, and budget constraint hinder the employment of additional teachers needed to support the country's students. One of the teachers explained the reason the country is seeing a decline in its education sector, especially with regard to the mass exodus of teachers.
Under Emerson Mnangagwa, we now have a regime whose priorities do not include provision of public goods such as education. So we've seen a massive cutting of expenditure on education, for example. Under Robert Mugabe in 1980, 23% of our national budget would go towards education. But from 2017, when Emerson assumed office, we have never had a budget that allocation more than 15% of the annual budget. So what we simply have to do, we are dealing with, grappling with this ideological disposition, which is against providing public goods to the people.
Few months ago, the country's Prime Minister Constantino Chiwenga announced that the country intends to introduce a law that would make it illegal for other nations to recruit its health workers, a law that may be applicable to teachers leaving the country. Analysts, however, see criminalizing foreign recruiters is not the best means of addressing the situation, while emphasizing measures to be taken by the government to create a lasting solution.
They are not addressing the issue, because what we need is to find what it is that is causing people to go outside. And what it is there are poor living conditions, poor salaries, and anything that has to do with the remuneration is poor. And worst of all, considering the medical situation in Zimbabwe, everyone who is not well is prescribed parasite and painkillers. It makes life not easier for those in the medical field.
As African countries continue to experience brain drain in different sectors of the economy, experts call for improved welfare of its professionals if these countries must keep their talent. Omolola Ololade reporting for News Central.
All right, that was a report carefully packaged by our correspondent, Omolola Ololade. Now, joining us to shed more light on this topic is the president of the Amalgamated Rural Teachers Union of Zimbabwe, Obert Masaraure. Obert, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me. Greetings, viewers.
All right, thank you, Obert. Now, well, Obert, it seems like the issue of brain drain, particularly when it comes to education sector, is not peculiar to Zimbabwe alone. It happens almost across sub-Saharan Africa, but I think Zimbabwe is beginning to feel the pinch. I'll jump into this straight. Now, we used to say in the past that the reward of teachers is in heaven, but it seems now that teachers across Africa are beginning to seek their reward while on earth. As said in this particular report that we just saw, Obert, now, you know, why exactly can we say that teachers in Zimbabwe are beginning to leave the country in droves?
I think it is because the intention of those who are in power is to get rid of all those who can think. Because those who can think are a threat for their hegemony and preservation. I think for me it's so deliberate. You know, you want to get rid of the thinkers and then also make sure that you don't have future generations who can think. Then you focus on regenerating your own children to become the next leaders. It's so deliberate from the leaders. You know, they've attacked the teaching profession from two fronts. They've made sure that they deny the ordinary teacher a salary. which can sustain them. Of course, you could look at the conditions. The cost of living, for example, in Zimbabwe is 50% higher than that in South Africa. But a teacher in South Africa paid almost $1,000 as a minimum, but the teacher in Zimbabwe earns around $350. Then you would also look at the SADC average, Southern Africa average salary of a teacher is around $600. So what we now have is serious underpayment, but yet Zimbabwe is the highest cost of living in the region, but the lowest paid teachers. Of course, everyone will feel the pinch and they want to get away. But there's then the second front where they are attacking them to say, you are hungry, but we don't allow you to speak. We don't even allow you to complain. We don't allow you to say, I need the food. I need food. So they've made sure that they've instituted repressive laws that silences the disgruntled teachers. So in a context where you are not allowed to voice, everyone feels the need to leave. Because at least deny me the meal, but give me a chance to complain that I'm hungry. Then obviously, if you give me the chance to speak out, I can have confidence or maybe some hope that maybe tomorrow I will get the food. But in Zimbabwe now, the teacher is not paid, but is not allowed to say I'm hungry. So, but you see these statistics that you of 300 teachers leaving per month, they are too low. Where do we really look at what is happening on the ground? Because there are some teachers who are said to be still working but who are not working. We have teachers who are still registered as teachers by government, but they are no longer giving a service. Some of them are in the informal economy, spending the better time, part of their time in the informal economy. I can tell you with authority that Zimbabwe schools are now manned by just 10% of committed teachers. Or 90% of the teachers are either there but not teaching or completely withdrawn from the school ecosystem. So it's a serious crisis that we have. And this crisis, unfortunately, is not going to be tamed anytime soon because those in power are happy with the crisis because it ensures that their hold on power is not challenged. It ensures that the young people who are supposed to be challenging them are taken to drugs. It ensures that young women are getting teenage pregnancies. It ensures that people who should be active citizens are now disenfranchised because they lack the knowledge of what should have been that they can be provided with.
Okay, Obert, now some months ago, the vice president of the country, Constantino Chiwenga, did say that there are plans in place to criminalize the foreign hiring of health workers when he was talking about, the mass exodus of health workers from the country. This, I mean, a lot of people have interpreted this as being very unfair and, unrelatably unimaginable to do so. So I think my question would be, does this relate, or is the same thing going to happen with the teachers in Zimbabwe? And if it will, isn't that just going to be unfair?
That was a stupid statement, I would say. Was at the end of the day, you can't criminalize the exodus of people whom you are denying a meal, people who are hungry, because you have deliberately made them hungry. We read the statement, and obviously in the health sector, they are taking advantage of the fact that those who graduate maybe from the nursing school and the graduate doctors, they are bonded. There's a scheme that they will be bonded to work for the government for some time. And I think that is the only loophole that they were taking advantage of. And tell you what, these student nurses are now going to Zambia to be trained as nurses. I have a friend who was leading the nurses in Zimbabwe, but the government of Zimbabwe chose to descend on him, to label him a regime change agent. He has since moved out of the country, and there's a set up a successful nursing school outside the country, but still in the region. They are now recruiting student nurses from Zimbabwe, training them, giving them their certificates so that they have freedom to look for job opportunities. So you will never, at any point in time in life, try then to use force to limit the movement of people. People will find other ways to maneuver around that. If they were going to make the same decision for the education sector, of course, it would be laughable because unfortunately for them in the education sector, when people are graduating from the teacher training college, when people are graduating from the university, they have their papers, they have their certificates. So I don't know how they will implement how they enforce the criminalization of migration. So I think the only logical way to then try to curb a brain drain is not to use force, but then to have consensus with those who work for government, to sit down with them, to really have an honest discussion to say what is really what is their plan to transform the lived realities for us, the workers working for you in the near future. Then you agree maybe on time frames, you agree on a strategy. Unfortunately, we have a government of looters who don't have time to engage with their workers because they know they have nothing to say. They can't tell us that they don't have money because they know everyone knows that they've been stealing. So the only way for them to try to manage the situation is to try to use force, which unfortunately doesn't work. And obviously, the people suffer.
Certainly, the use of force doesn't seem like the best solution here. But of course, where there is brain drain or academic migration, if you like, the impact is usually felt more by the people whom these, will I say, migrants are servicing. In this case, in terms of nurses and teachers, we're talking about patients and students who feel the impact the most. So what do you think will be the implication of the shortage of teachers and health workers on the people who need their services? Again, I'm talking about the students in Zimbabwe and the patients who need to be taken care of by nurses and medical practitioners.
We are already seeing the impact. We are already ensuring the crisis of people dying of avoidable death because there is not enough medical staff to take care of those who need health care. We are already feeling the pinch of having teacher learning ratios of up to 1 teacher attending to 140 learners, which is unacceptable. At the end of the day, the quality of the education being delivered is so deplorable. At the end of the day, we will miss important targets, be it the realization of sustainable development goal with regards to inclusive access to quality education. We've completely missed that mark. We are missing our own local economic development targets with a national development strategy, which is supposed to be concluded in 2025, I guess. But that one we have already completely missed it because the key priority areas for that blueprint is the provision of education, then to give the human capital that can then drive economic development. We are completely missing that. What we then have is a nation engulfed in crime, where our young people, because they don't have opportunities, are taking to crime. What we now have is a nation engulfed in drug abuse, where our young people who can't access education are taking to drugs. What we now have is a scourge of teenage pregnancies, where our young girls who can't access education are getting pregnant and getting married, unfortunately. So what we now have is a generation that is being decimated by a group of greed ruling elites who don't care about the future of the ordinary people, because their sons and daughters are not resident in Zimbabwe. They've made sure that they've exported their children to get exotic knowledge elsewhere. So what we now have is some permanency of poverty among the majority of our people, and then having only the sons and daughters of the ruling elites accessing the best of our education. When we're coming back to the health service sector, we lost some very important lives recently. A young man who was a popular musician got involved in an accident, injuries that could have been attended to. The name Gerima Pansore, to those who would want to research about the case. We lost him. He got involved in an accident, but there were no health care workers to attend to him. He succumbed to injuries that could have been treated. At some point, I lost my vice president of the union that I lead. She succumbed to very minor injuries that could have been attended to, but there were no health care workers. So we are in a serious crisis where anyone who falls sick or anyone who gets injured, if there is no miracle, we lose them because we no longer have a health care. And the nation can never develop when it's not healthy. We are losing lives to cholera of all diseases because we do not have even the basics to attend to cholera patients. We have become a pathetic nation, failing to manage diseases that were dealt with by other jurisdictions in the 20th century, but we are battling to manage them in the 21st century. And it's so pathetic and we would pray that at least at some point, those who have powers to make decisions would realize how much they've plunged this republic into a nation of sorrowness and sadness.
All right, Obert, now, finally, teachers are moving in their hundreds to foreign countries for greener pastures, and that applies to their counterparts as well in the health sector, and it's causing shortage in both the health and education sector. But we seem to always miss something. When we talk about measures to take to avoid this or prevent this from happening, a lot of times we're always talking about infrastructure, facilities, equipment, but we do not exactly focus on making better living conditions available to these people. So I'm going to ask you what reforms you think that both sectors can introduce to improve the situation of things, not just for the sector in itself now, but for the people, the teachers and the health workers as well.
Yeah, we need urgent reforms. In the teaching profession, we've been advocating for the introduction of a teacher professional council, which is self-regulated, a council which is purely composed of the practitioners themselves, then allow the council to run the profession. With regards to conditions of services, let this be a council that is respected by the employer, not substituting the unions, but also allowing this council to set the standards on how the profession can be run. We want this professional to be dignified, and it can only be dignified where there are some standards that are set. But also to match the standards set by the council, then we will hope that the government itself, who is the employer for public sector workers, then gets to appreciate the need to urgently reward those who are working hard. So we have needs that are so variegated for example, for the teaching profession. You have a teacher who is in a very remote rural area. They need the basics, like just accessing a piece of land. But government is not prepared to just give them a piece of land so that they feel comfortable plowing their land, giving them their families food and working for the country. So there are also non-monetary incentives that can be provided by government. And this should be well thought out to say, what do our people need? Because at the end of the day, we are saying the government, we are a developing country, there's enough money obviously to pay the teachers. But when there is a shortfall, we also have natural resources that are at our disposal that can be distributed among our teachers, ensure that they are motivated to deliver. Same thing with our healthcare workers. We can be very innovative and come up with packages that we give them outside money. But what we are lacking is the political will to ensure that those who produce the wealth, those who take care of the nation are well catered for. We have a government that doesn't care about the welfare of the people. So they don't give much regard to the people who are supposed to be attending our ordinary people. So it's the first request that we would make to this government or any other government that can come is that say, bring to the closest of your heart the issues of the people, their education, their healthcare, and their food. And if you make sure that those are your priorities, you can always find ways of sitting down with those who deliver those services to ensure that they are happy in that delivery. Unfortunately, those we have the mandate are not prepared to do that.
Mm-hmm. Quite a sad story there, Obert. And again, like I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, this is a topic that many sub-Saharan African countries are dealing with. We do hope that teachers in Zimbabwe and of course health workers will be treated better so that the country doesn't have to lose its teachers. Obert Masaraure, president of the Amalgamated Rural Teachers Union of Zimbabwe, we want to say thank you so much for joining us and for contributing your own views on this topic. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Have a pleasant day.
And you too.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Obert. Well, I mean, interesting topic, and I do like that he mentioned some of the challenges that these teachers and health workers and some other people in different sectors as well, it's not just those sectors, are facing, and hopefully the government can look into that to give them, provide them better living conditions as well.
Definitely. Again, as I've been hammering, unfortunately, it is an endemic issue that's affecting many sub-Saharan African countries, which clearly means that the countries where these teachers and health workers are, and particularly it's teachers and health workers, by the way, the countries they are migrating to know the importance of teachers and health workers, and they keep attracting them with certain enticing offers, and then they leave, they go there. You know, like the question you asked, what then happens to the country where they are moving out from? It's clear that these countries are beginning to lack a lot of teachers. And a country without teachers, country without health workers, you can only imagine.
Is that even a country?
Is that even a country, as they say in Nigeria?
And
exactly.
I mean, just like he said, although maybe wrong use of word, but I mean, criminalizing countries that hire these people is just not.
It's not an
option.
option.